evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Frederik Schröder, and I am the Public Affairs Director for Daniel Clay and the facilitator of this online forum. First, I want to welcome our attendees from faraway lands. We have people with us from Spain, the Philippines, Malaysia, Tonga, and Pakistan. We greatly appreciate you being with us, so a warm welcome to you. The topic of this webinar is finding peace in times of pressure. So with that, I now turn it over to Daniel Clay.
Warmest greetings, joyous blessings to each of you. It is important for you to realize when you are speaking about the topics of depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress, alcoholism, drug addiction, and other addictions, even sex addictions and gambling addictions, that these are all similar. They all have a similar root cause, and most importantly, what you need to realize, whether you are dealing with the issue personally or whether you are trying to help someone else deal with such an issue, is that depression and all of the related issues we have mentioned are biological in nature. They are not a simple matter of mind and thought. They are not a simple matter of, oh, you don't want to be good or you aren't trying hard enough. These are real and true biological issues because they result from the chemical changes in the body. They result from things that are happening in the body and the body's response to it. Remember, you as a human being, you are a spiritual entity, but you as a human being incarnate on this earth in a physical animal body. And that body is not necessarily made for the world in which you are living, because you are living in a world that is now very metropolitan, is very mechanical and technological, with electronics and all sorts of gadgets. You have artificial lighting. Your days do not follow the normal light cycles. There are a multitude of things that are very different. Even your stresses are very different from what your body is made for. For your body is made as if you were an animal in the wild, and everything would be relaxed, and then there would be a stressful situation. There might be a predator or an enemy from which you must flee or which you must fight, and there would be a rush of adrenaline, and there would be the release of chemicals, and there would be electrical synapses firing in your brain and throughout your nervous system, and you would be responding appropriately. And then you would take to flight, or you would take to fight, or you might even freeze solid. For these are the natural responses in such situations. But when you look at what happens today, where a person sits down and gets tense over an issue and begins to row these chemicals within the body, but they do nothing. You are watching television and the music gets tense and you become tense, but there is no release. You're still sitting in your armchair or your couch and your body is simply responding, building more and more anxiety. Or perhaps you have a huge event happen, but you have no control over it. And this then makes chemical changes in your body. But these changes, if the event is severe enough, can be very long lasting, especially if you do not have an immediate way to respond. Just think for a moment, as if you were on the street in a foreign country, you were the member of the military, and suddenly there is an explosion, but there is no way you can respond. If you were a wild animal, you would run, or you would attack, but you are trained. You must act calmly and collectedly. You must do what you are trained to do, and you cannot flee or run. The adrenaline may pump, but you will calmly do what you must do. This has a lasting impact on the physical body. And what then of gamblers and sex addicts and drug addicts? There are chemical changes in the body. The people who actually become alcoholics do so because there is a chemical change in the body. Not everybody has the same chemical change, whether it be to a particular food or to drink, to alcohol, to drugs. Different people's bodies respond in different ways. The alcoholic's body actually gets a rise from the alcohol before the depression, but in order to keep that elevated feeling, whether it's appropriate or not, they continue to drink a little more each time, keeping that altered chemical state in their body. The same thing is happening when people take such drugs as cocaine and heroin and morphine. The changes, the chemical changes in the body. And there are a few that have very little or no changes, and such might not be an issue, but overall, drug addiction, alcoholism, gambling. Yes, gambling, because the gambler is getting a rush of feel-good chemicals as they anticipate. It's not the win, it's the anticipation. That is why gamblers always lose in the end. A gambling addict is not gambling for the money. They are gambling for that rush, that addiction, that feel good as the serotonin and the release of all of those chemicals in the brain. So when you now look at anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, and all of the addictions. The first thing you must know if you want to help yourself or to help someone else is that it is a true biological condition. It is due to the chemical changes in your system. And you cannot just think those changes away. This is an important thing for you to remember. Do not forget it. You cannot say to someone simply, oh, man up. You cannot say to someone simply, you can do better than that. They are fighting physical changes within their own body. They are responding to changes that are in themselves, and they are real. They're not imagined, and they're not something that they have control over. Biggest thing to avoid is just simply telling someone, oh, it's all in your head. It's just the way you think. Think happy thoughts. It's not about the thought. You can be watching a beautiful stream trickle with fish jumping and birds chirping. If the chemicals in your brain are wrong, all you're going to have is anxiety or depression. It is for you to know that you can tell people, oh, I'm there for you. But just being there is not always quite enough. You have to not only be there, you have to be able to acknowledge that the person who is suffering has a real problem and stop just pushing them away saying, oh, it's fine. We'll make it all better. Let's go get ice cream. That won't make it better. You may proceed as you will.
Well, from Doreen in Maryland. I have a son who appears to be chronically depressed. What can I do to help my son?
What you must realize is chronic depression is actually a serious and true illness. It is not a simple state of mental laxness. It is a chemical imbalance. And the best way that this can often be dealt with is through good medical care, so the chemical imbalances can be properly treated via the prescriptions of the medications that will regulate and inhibit the release of certain chemicals within the brain and within the nervous system. Anxiety and depression are brothers and sisters in this, in the fact that they are a long-term issue. Some people think when you talk about being blue, that is an expression that somehow is just artistic, Picasso-like. But those who have suffered, truly suffered the blues, know that when you have a chemical imbalance in the brain, that is so very, very severe, you stop seeing beautiful colors of the world. You see shades of gray, shades of blue. It is very much real where the term the blues comes from. And the way in which this is best dealt with is medically. Now, it is true that there are different causations of depression. There are types of depression, such as those that are attached to light cycles. And of course, with the way humanity operates today, living in artificial light, often not getting the spectrum of light that they need from the sun on a daily basis, often sleeping irregular hours because of using the artificial light, and then having artificial light thrown at them by their televisions and their computers and their phones. This causes more of an issue, but it is for some that light is an issue. For some, the original causation is otherwise. That stress of always wanting to be good enough, to be better, to do, to achieve, and never feeling like they can accomplish what they want to accomplish, and agonizing over it continually. This was less often a problem in the agrarian society. Farmers have real issues to worry about. They worried about planting and the crops not growing and the cattle dying and possibly their family dying, or that they might die of starvation. They had real worries. Now, worry and anxiety are two different things. Worry is a justified concern, but it is one that you're dealing with, so it is not causing this chemical buildup in the system. Anxiety, however, which can become depression, is this buildup. I wish I could do better. I'm not doing good enough at this. Oh, I'm so upset. There will be a test tomorrow. And the anxiety builds. The anxiety builds. How will you release that anxiety? Probably in the wrong way. Maybe you will go watch a horror movie and build some more anxiety, but you have felt an adrenaline rush, so you maybe think you feel a little bit better, not realizing that you have added to the base anxiety. Or you hop on a roller coaster just so you can have that adrenaline rush. For some people, that may actually burn some of that if they don't have too much harbored. So now let's get specific, because we're trying to give some general information here that everyone can use. But let's be specific to the individual now. What is needed here is actually not just talk therapy. Talk therapy with a psychologist can sometimes be beneficial. And sometimes it can actually relieve real anxiety or real depression by removing a mental imbalance of cognitive realities. But the real matter here is that this individual needs to have both the uptake inhibitors blocked, and there needs to be a balance. So this is a whole chemical issue that needs to be addressed medically and can be addressed medically in a very short period of time. A psychiatrist may want to do a little talking therapy with it to reorient the person's thinking, but the real healing simply comes from having the chemical balance of the body restored. Now, some people are going to say, oh, but why would you want someone to take something so unnatural? Well, it is unnatural to live in the environment that you're living in. It is unnatural to be exposed to the stresses the way people are now exposed to stresses continuously. And as you have developed these, you have also developed ways of handling them. And we would say to you, do not think this has a stigma. Do not think it is inappropriate. If you ran a nail through your hand, you would pull that nail out and you would take antibiotics so that rusty nail would not cause gangrene. Why? That is physical. The chemicals that are being released in your body are physical. Why is it that treating the nail stuck in the hand has no stigma, and properly treating real, honest, painful depression has a stigma? There is no excuse for such. That is why it must be understood that these are truly biological issues. You may proceed as you will.
I have a question here from Jacqueline in Virginia. What steps can I take to heal and move forward with my career after working for employers in toxic work environments where I experienced microaggression and discrimination?
First, you should understand that the experience of microaggression is so common that you cannot simply say it is a workplace issue. It is an issue between spouses. It is an issue between parents and children. It is an issue between parents and grandparents. It is an issue between brothers and sisters and brothers and brothers and sisters and sisters. It is an issue between employers and employees, supervisors, and the staff that works beneath them. It is an issue between boyfriend and girlfriend. It is an issue within a classroom of 10-year-olds. It is an issue at the swim meet. It is an issue that takes place everywhere continually. Part of it in your society is the way in which individuals are raised, thinking that they have a right to this or to that, thinking that they are owed this or that. This is especially true in middle and upper class children. There is a feeling of entitlement. And with that comes a desensitization to what other people are feeling, because people are so interested in what they feel, what they think, what they deserve. And what happens is these people slowly but surely become aggressive. Add to that, of course, all of the people whose parents have mistreated them, and they then go out and mistreat the other children in class. But if you would go to some of the Asian societies, you'll find that there is a lot less of an issue with this. Now, all of that being said, that is not to make it any less of an issue. What we are saying is it is really way, way too prevalent. And there is no way in the United States of America to escape this. Now, as far as toxic work environments, it is true. You put people together and they can be very, very different. How you respond, because you are not responsible for what they say. You're not responsible for what they do. You're only responsible for how you respond to what they do. Now, the suggestion here is that regular times of meditation and having a way to actually prevent yourself from responding with anger. Because anger actually starts to release chemicals in the system. We're back to this whole thing that we are talking about. But anger in this kind of a situation is controllable enough if you know what is happening and respond appropriately. Now, if you harbor anger over a period of time, then it becomes great enough that it would become a true issue. So if you switch work environments, in the environment you're in, you have already been pigeonholed. Now, toxicity runs in different ways. Those trying to be dominant over you, and toxicity runs to those trying to belittle you, at least to those others, to raise themselves up because they want to feel more important. But then there is the really dangerous toxicity, the one you don't even know about, where they belittle you to others in order to build themselves up to take the promotion that they were afraid you were going to get. So now, when you switch jobs, when you switch employment, the trick is not to become pigeonholed again, but rather to wear a smile. Now, this does not mean, and we are telling you this very blatantly, that things will not hurt occasionally. But if you do not show that hurt and you wear a smile and you manage to communicate happiness to the others, they will stop, especially if they don't already know you and have a way that they expect you to respond. Because their actions require a response from you for them to continue their actions. So if they do not get the expected response or get a really bizarre response, it upsets their world. And they will then come along and be a part of your world. However, if you respond in the way they expect, then they will do this action again. And upon the repetition, They will expect you again to respond, and soon you will have put yourself in the same box, and you will have the same problem continuing. So this is the first issue, and we're saying this to everyone. If you want to end this problem, if you truly want to end it, start being nice to everyone and demand that your children be nice to everyone and demand that the people around you be nice to you. Asking for civility is not too much in this age of bestiality. Now, as to the more harsh issue, but possibly in some ways less problematic issue of racism. Why do we say less problematic? Well, one, it is just as pervasive, but the first issue is often not recognized. Everybody is doing it, and everybody thinks what they're doing is okay. Racism has become a recognized issue. You at least know what you're dealing with. Now, there are no magic cures to change what is happening. Humanity has been this way. It is a primal part of what humans are, and it is very unfortunate. Racism is not just white and black. Racism has even been the difference between being Korean and Japanese, or the difference between being Chinese and Japanese, or the difference between being from the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom of this European nation or that European nation. Racism is without bounds, and it is a nasty legacy, but it is bigger and more recognizable. So how do you deal with it? Well, if you're leaving employment because of it, then hopefully it will not be as bad where you go. But the truth of the matter is that it has never been adequately dealt with. It has always been pushed under the carpet, and it ends up coming out sometimes in little remarks, and sometimes in an explosion like you saw January the 6th. It is possibly the biggest hurdle that mankind has for this century. Now, to you personally, the question becomes, do you understand that racism is not just about race? It is also about education, poverty, hunger, medical care. And the real way to fight this is by teaching people to have basic humanity. Look what happens with the Rohingya. Look at Myanmar. Look across the globe. There you have, what are they? Peace-loving Buddhist massacring Muslims. Why? Why? Because they can? Because they're different? Because there is no good reason. There really is no good reason. Look at what is going on with Israel and Palestine. These people are from the same basic race. They're the same genetic stock. And they still are fighting. Look what had occurred in Ireland. There you see a success story. There you see a success story because the people who wanted things to change worked to make it change. But you still have radicals all living off in their little enclaves to the far left and far right. And if Palestine and Israel brokered a deal tomorrow, they would still have little enclaves of people whose self-interest would be to preserve the hatred. And you see clearly now in your political system that those who lean towards the right desire to preserve hatred because it is a way for them to hold on to power, despite the fact that with the changes that are happening, with the changes in populations, the shifts and growths as there is diversity coming into the population, 7, 8 years, what have they got, Max? Yet they would destroy their own government just to hold on to what? What? The past. And what was the past? The annihilation of the Native Americans, the slavery of Blacks, the past. And you wonder why they're using racist tropes. And how do you get over this? By teaching enough children about the one true religion, love. By having children black, white, red, yellow, purple, and pink as can be, love each other. And will that make a total cure? No. There will still be pockets of people wanting to promote hate because it's in their self-interest. And it always will be, because as those who are spiritually attain enlightenment move on and others come into this earthly realm, they must go through all of the same lessons. And they're going to make all of the same messes. You say, but that seems to make things very difficult. But enlightenment should not be for the self. It should be for all of humanity. You know, everybody has seen the old Christian man or woman that would say, well, I believe this is true and I believe that is true. And I'm going to get to heaven even if if none of my children or anybody in my family makes it, I'm going to be that. Well, that's pretty damn selfish. Moses said, forgive these people of their transgression, or remove me from your book of life. That is true love. The lamas come back when they do so at peril to their own spirit, for they could lose that which they have gained. They come back to bring enlightenment to others. And that is absolutely the truth of love. You want good for yourself, not above others, but for others, by others, through others. In other words, by bringing others to enlightenment, that is the good you do for yourself. That was the good of the Christ. That was the good of the Buddha. That was the good of Krishna. That now shows you that if you want to make a difference, what you have to do is teach love. Teach love. Teach love. You may proceed as you will.
What is the root cause of depression?
The root cause of depression, the root cause of anxiety, the root cause of post-traumatic stress syndrome, and the root cause of multiple addictions is the chemical balances changing in the brain. It is actually a physiological, neurological response. It is when you are afraid, you have responses in the brain that take place. When you have extreme anger, when you have doubt, these responses are a little less. So when all of this builds and builds and builds, and it has no avenue for relief, that is the root cause. Now, there are little causes, some of which are just little physiological quirks, like not getting enough sunlight or not being in sync with the rhythms of light and the rhythms and magnetic rhythms of the earth. Some of them are little issues like television being truly a depressant, and over a period of time being able to cause prolonged chemical changes in the being. Some of them are a desire for a certain feeling, as in the case with many of the addictions. Addictions may also likewise be a desire to avoid a certain feeling. So depression and alcoholism could go hand in hand, because while you are in that state that the alcohol gives you, that is eventually going to cause greater depression, you are relieving the pain temporarily. So the root cause is chemical. It is physiological. And that is the most important thing for anyone to understand if they either want to overcome depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, or any addiction. It is the most important thing to understand if you want to help someone with such. The root cause is physiological. You may proceed as you will.
If I think happy thoughts or have enough happiness around me, will it cure depression?
It will not cure depression to think happy thoughts or have enough happiness around you. This is probably the cruelest thing that an individual who is trying to be nice to a depressed person can do. Say to them, oh, just think of something happy. Remember when we were little children and we used to play this trick on grandma? Remember how you used to giggle? Now, that depressed person might laugh. You might get them to respond positively, but this does nothing to change the chemical balance. What it changes is that moment, and that moment only. The problem is still there. It may make the person who has said it feel good. Oh, I managed to make that person happy. Well, you did not cure their depression. You might have made them smile. You might have given them a second of thought about something other than depression, but you didn't change the chemical balances. You didn't change what was going on inside them. You didn't change anything. What you did was go to the person with the rusty nail in their hand and say to them, oh, remember when your hand didn't have a nail in it? You remember how your hand felt? Doesn't that feel better when you think of how your hand felt without a nail in it? No, it sure doesn't. You may proceed as you will.
Can children suffer from depression?
Because depression is a chemical imbalance, children can suffer from depression. There are caveats here. First caveat is that children usually begin life not depressed, usually. And there has to be something that actually causes the tension, the stress, the anxiety that starts building the depression, whether it is abuse, fear, doubt, just anxiety, childhood anxiety, thinking, that they aren't quite good enough. Maybe the parents continually put them down. Perhaps they're bullied continually. So a child can develop depression. Extra television isn't helpful either, but children are more immune to this than adults are. Now, one of the biggest caveats is, what if the child's parent was a drug abuser during the time of pregnancy? the mother can injure the fetus. Lots of drugs actually cause damage to the physiological being. Some of them will cause damage that will cause learning disabilities. Some of them can cause damage that would actually cause a child to be born in a depressed state and actually need to be helped or aided through withdrawal after birth. So can a child suffer depression? Yes. Under normal circumstances, a child should not be suffering depression. And as such, if a child is born healthy and the parents have not abused drugs or alcohol, specifically the mother, and if the child has a good domestic life, the parents do not abuse it, push it, expect it to do things on a bizarre schedule that is adult but not childlike. If the child has a loving childhood, then depression should not be an issue, at least not until that child enters into school, where they are exposed to other stresses and pressures from teachers and students and friends. Then you begin to develop all of the things that are required very quickly, depending on the chemical response and the malleability of the individual. A child can become very quickly depressed at that point, or build depression over the years until by the teen years, it is often seen that children are severely depressed and suicidal when the changes of adolescence set in and puberty, as the child begins to sprout hair and change and develop sexual organs and alter their voice, they become dangerously possible to suffer depression, suicide. It becomes dangerously possible because we do not have the loving, kind, accepting environment. We do not teach our children, and they do not understand. They need to understand what they are experiencing. They need to understand that everybody else is experiencing it. You know, children sometimes get upset. They have pimples on their face. If they pay any real attention, they would realize that the other children are too busy worrying about their own little pimples to ever see their pimples. Just the way it is. But then they develop this anxiety. They think everybody's looking at them. Maybe one day they get laughed at. And usually if they're laughed at, it's because they did something silly, not because of what they think they're being laughed at for. So, in short, can children be depressed? Yes. In long, it's abnormal in small children and becomes more normal towards the teen years. And in the teen years, and then in the years where some people go into warfare, and then in the years of childbearing, are the times where depression often hit their peaks, thrown in with that mid-career time when a lot of people question everything they've done in life. You may proceed as you will.
Will shock therapy cure depression?
Oh, the ancient practice of shock therapy. The baseball bat of psychiatry. It can relieve the symptoms much as alcohol does, and just as alcohol does, can do a lot of damage. The actual benefits of shock therapy seldom outweigh the loss of memory, the damage, and the physical trauma that occurs. Now, in the coming years, it will be found that magnets with an extremely high magnetic field spun about the head will be able, without having the same effects as shock therapy, the same detrimental effects, will be able, in some cases, to benefit depression and anxiety. It will also be found that magnets used in the appropriate way to reset the system may, for some people, be beneficial for migraines. So there is a hope for magnetic therapy in the future, but shock therapy is really a relic of the past and should be put in the same category of history as the electric chair. You may proceed as you will.
I don't like to take medication. And if I don't, how can depression be cured without medication?
This is a real issue, and this is one of these lose-lose issues for people of certain religious faiths that teach that just thinking yourself better will make you better, and that as you think, so you are. Now, these people teach this and believe this, but that doesn't make it so. A spiritual problem can be fixed. Love can fix many things, but love, all of the love in the world, will not change a chemical imbalance. Now, it is true that a faith healer can lay hands upon you or say you are healed. And as we were speaking a moment ago about magnetic fields, the energies that they can pass through their hands, the energies that they can pass through their thoughts, they can reset the electrosynapses in the brain and in the nervous system and truly change things. And that will change the chemical balance and change the chemicals that the body is producing and can break depression. So it can simply be healed by a faith healer. Now understand, that healer is not doing magic. They are actually emitting impulses that make these changes. Those impulses may not seem to be bound by time and space, but they are real. And it is a physiological thing happening. So, what would we say to those who say, we don't want to take drugs? We would say to you, everything is a drug. If you drink too much water, it will kill you. It will throw your electrolytes out of balance and it will kill you. Water is a lethal drug, but you require it to live. There are drugs that will inhibit the negative chemicals. There are drugs that will allow the serotonin to be more abundantly received. And there is no reason that you should deny yourself these. If you are a member of a religion that says, oh, God does all of the healing. Oh, yes, God does all healing. And sometimes he uses doctors to heal, and sometimes he uses psychiatrists to heal, and sometimes God uses drugs to heal. That nail that was in your hand, it was pulled out. When you looked at your hand, you didn't say, my hand is whole, and simply leave the nail in it. You pulled the nail out. Now, you may say, I'm not going to a doctor, or I am going to a doctor, or I will take antibiotics. When your hand starts to turn black and you have gangrene running up your arm or a severe blood infection, you will take antibiotics or you'll pay the price for it. It is the same with the drugs, the antidepressants. You will use them or you will not use them and choose willingly to suffer because somebody has taught you that it is God's will for you to suffer. That God of love wants you to suffer because, well, he loves everybody else a little bit more than you. We don't think so. Go take your medication. You may proceed as you will.
What brings someone to suicidal thoughts and what brings someone to actually commit suicide?
What you have to ask is what causes such great pain that someone would want to relieve it by committing suicide? And you have to ask yourself too, is depression something that makes one suicidal? And is suicide the result of depression? No, the answers are a little more complex than you may think. Depression does not in and of itself make one suicidal, although it can aggravate such by causing pain and causing distress. Suicide is usually committed in a moment of despair, not in a moment of depression, but in a moment of severe despair or in a moment of hopelessness where there is no way seen out. Now, of course, there are other questions which you are not asking, but a multitude of people would hurt themselves. And you say, is that a result of depression? And it can be, but why then would they hurt themselves? It's just like asking why, if alcoholism is going to make the situation worse, why does the person drink? It relieves the pain temporarily. Cutters cut themselves. People who abuse themselves to cause pain, that actually releases the endorphins, the same ones that are released by gambling for the gambling addict, and gives them temporary relief. But that does not mean they are truly suicidal. Suicide comes in a moment of total despair. And if you can get a person through that moment, they will be okay, at least for the time being. They may have another moment of despair at some point, but in between, they're going to want to live no matter how depressed, no matter how much pain they are in. People strive to live. People cling to life. Depression is not in and of itself a cause of suicide. But if in that depression you see despair and hopelessness, then you are a prime candidate for suicide. And If you can get the person beyond that despair and hopelessness, it does not cure their depression. You still need to work on the depression. And if the person is not depressed, that does not guarantee you that a traumatic event may not all of a sudden cause them to feel completely overwhelmed with despair and hopelessness. And if they do, they will be suicidal. It'll pass quickly, but it's real and it is danger. You may proceed as you will.
Would you give us an end message that we all need or would like to hear from you?
If we could say one thing to each person out there who is thinking about suicide, we would say this: there is always hope. Just pause. If you give it a second thought, you won't want to do it. Talk to someone. Call a helpline. Do anything to delay for a few seconds, a few minutes, and you are less likely to commit suicide, because that kind of despair, that kind of hopelessness doesn't last very long. But death, it lasts. Now, if we were going to say one thing to those who are suffering depression, God is love. All true religion is love. Love is the only true religion. There is no religion other than love. There is no God other than love. Center yourself in love. And there is no stigma in something that is caused physiologically. Depression is just as real as the nails in the hand. You deserve to be able to get help. You deserve to be able to get the proper medications. You deserve to be happy. And if we could say one thing to all of the people who have not suffered depression, addiction, post-traumatic stress syndrome, if we could say one thing to the people that have not suffered these things, what we would say to you is this: it is physiological. You have avoided it not because you are stronger. You have avoided it not because you are better. You have avoided it simply because life hasn't dealt it to you. It could happen to you tomorrow. So have mercy and compassion on those who suffer it now. Mercy and compassion, two of the better parts of love. Go forth in kindness. We leave you with blessings and with peace.